Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are about to begin our 20th season here as general manager of the Oakland Athletics, coming off of the best season we've ever had with this team, 120 wins and a World Series championship a year ago. So certainly likely nowhere to go but down with this team as we begin spring training here in 2043. Do have a few roster decisions we'll be making. I think as we think about this roster, the last spot or two in the bullpen are certainly up for grabs at this point, and there's probably a fifth outfielder spot and a utility infielder spot that could also be decided over the next month or so in spring training. So in addition to figuring out who's going to fill those roles for us, also want to keep this team as healthy as possible. Not really too much interesting on the free agent market as we sit here on February 27th. We have made close to 10 offers, around 10 offers or so, to bolster out the upper levels of our minor league organization with some players who can hopefully help us, but don't see any true difference makers on the market. So at this point, we are likely to head into 2043 with some money to spend, which hopefully will serve us well if we get to the point where we decide we want to add a player or two to help us in the push for the pennant as we get closer to the trade deadline. And with the long development lab programs now complete, we've put a bunch of players into programs primarily focused on defense. I know there's been some discussion in the comments to the last few episodes about the enhanced development lab features that are be coming out in about a month in OOTP 26. Definitely looking forward to seeing what those look like. An example of where I think they might be helpful: last year's outstanding rookie Juan Ramirez, who primarily played DH for us, had a monster year with 41 homers and 134 ribbies, is a very poor defensive player. I think I would prefer to be enhancing his mediocre abilities at first base rather than the outfield, although he's better defensively in the outfield. I think we potentially have a more natural use for him at first base, given that our outfield with Selvey in left field, Armstrong in center field, and Uresti in right field is pretty well set at this point. But unfortunately, with the way the development lab is right now, although we've got him listed as a first baseman and we'd prefer that he be working on his defense at first base, the only choice is to work at his defense in the outfield. And it does sound like one of the enhancements that's coming with the new development lab is a little bit more of a choice into whether we'd want to work on his infield skills or his outfield skills. So it sounds like that's an interesting enhancement. Have watched the video with Will Bay and Dr. Dynastic talking about some of the enhancements that are coming, and it sounds like a nice improvement on this version 1 of the development lab that we've had for this past year with OOTP 25. So the proof will be in the pudding as to how all of this stuff actually works when it's up and running, but optimistic that it'll be a nice enhancement for the game in 26. And as I've talked about, definitely really pleased with how this A's playthrough has gone, and appreciate all the engagement from our viewers over the past 10 months or so. Looking forward to hopefully finishing on a strong note and getting a repeat championship at some point over these final few seasons that we're going to have here in Oakland. But That being said, also excited to move on to the new version of the game and a new challenge when OOTP 26 is out in the not too distant future. And as we're getting spring training underway, got 59 players in camp, and nobody at the major league level has a injury at this point. We do have a good arm, Ronnie Dehan, who spent last year in AAA, who's going to be out for spring training and into the beginning of the regular season. He was questionable to make the major league roster this year anyways, and it sounds like by early May he should be back and healthy, and we'll have an opportunity to compete for a roster spot as the season moves on and we see what he can do in AAA. But right now the team is healthy and well, and the goal certainly when we get to opening day on April 2nd is to have the team continue to be healthy and well so we can head north with the 26 players that we really want to be on this roster. And as spring training really gets underway, got some good results and bad results in terms of our monthly player development. We'll focus on the positive, although certainly the declines that we've seen in Bobby Surgener as a left-handed reliever are not positive. But the 23-year-old pitcher, Luis Villarreal, who should have a very prominent role in our rotation for the next decade, current movement, current control, both improved, and his overall and potential ratings also improved. He was 2-0 with a 3.32 ERA as a September call-up last season. And we did, when he was in AA this time last year, sign him to a 10-year, $68 million extension. So the hope is that Luis will be a big part of this rotation for as long as we do end up continuing to play this series here in Oakland. And unfortunately, we've got a injury here in the early stages of spring training, and it's one that we probably anticipated. You'll remember this past off season, we had options to try to bring back either Doug Weiss or Mike Gallick when we made some other moves to free up some money. Weiss, who we think has a higher ceiling but is more injury prone, is the guy who ended up being more reasonable with us in his demands before free agency. But unfortunately, Weiss is going to be out with a strained hammy for about 2 months. I guess the only positive is that it doesn't involve his arm, but certainly that will be an important injury for us. We did give him the very front-loaded contract since we had a relatively small amount of money on the books this year. So this is the year that we're going to find it most difficult to extract value from the deal, and particularly with the fact that he's likely to miss at least the first month of the regular season. Will give us an opportunity to see some different pitchers in the majors at the start of the year, and we'll give somebody else an opportunity in the rotation for at least a month. But still definitely disappointing that Mr. Weiss is already banged up and we're not even a week into spring training. And our Oakland A's were the most successful team of anyone in the spring training this year with an 18-7-3 record, so that is very positive. Unfortunately, on the last day of spring training, another injury to our starting rotation. Macho Rangel, who we picked up in a trade at the beginning of this offseason, had him slotted in as our number 5 starter. Obviously, he would have moved up to number 4 most likely with the injury to Weiss. But Rangel is now going to miss about 3 weeks, so he'll also be out for the start of the season. So 40% of our prospective starting rotation is going to be beginning this 2043 season on the IL, unfortunately, but it's a long year, 6 months, 162 games for the season, and if we miss Rangel for 3 or 4 starts at the beginning of the year and we miss the first 6 or 7 starts from Mr. Weiss, if that's the only significant injuries that the two of those players have to deal with this year, unfortunately, it's probably a deal we'd have to take. And we've made our decisions as far as the 26-man roster. We'll talk through those shortly. It is opening day today. We're going to be on the road against our division rival, Houston Astros. But before we talk about the 26-man roster, we'll talk about what happened in the development lab. Unfortunately, no improvement for Luis Godina or Jonah Richards on defense and base running fundamentals. Had not a great second shorter period here where we tend to focus on the defense. Number of no improvements and several poor results also. Darnell Selvey, poor result in left field. Coy Simmons did improve defensively in center field, although the former first-round pick of ours was a late cut for us and is not going to make the Major League roster. Mike Homer, the two-way player, improved his infield defense. Good to see that. No improvement for Joe Banks at pitcher defense. No improvement for Edgar Hermosillo defensively. Juan Ramirez did improve modestly in right field. We talked about with the fact that our outfield is so good offensively and more importantly for purposes of moving him out of the DH spot defensively, that in a perfect world we would have liked to work on his defense at first base. Unfortunately, don't have that option quite yet. Wilson Rangel improves his defense at pitcher. No improvement for Jim West. Successful program in left field for Devin Carrick. Luis Covarrubias, the young catcher, successful with bunting drills. Joe Heilman improved his defense at pitcher. Kadir Noyle, no improvement. David Palomares, no improvement. Macho Rangel, although he's injured, did improve his defense program at pitcher. Nelson Romero, no improvement at second base. Luis Villarreal, poor result, trying to improve his defense at pitcher. Luis Rangel, prospect, did improve his defense at second base. Poor result for the young infielder Jacoby Manelli, who's still probably a year and a half away from potentially helping us in the majors. John Fisher expects us to win it all again this season, even after cutting our budget following a 120-win profitable season last year. So the pressure is still high for our Oakland Athletics. As we mentioned, going to be starting the season with Macho Rangel, who was penciled in as our number 5 starter, and Doug Weiss, who was penciled in as our number 3 starter, both on the injured list. So that's going to give opportunities for a couple of other guys to be in our rotation this year. Back-to-back Cy Young Award winner Federico Arriola, who's also led the American League in wins, ERA, and WHIP each of the last 2 seasons, back as our number 1 starter. The youngster Luis Villarreal will step up right into our number 2 starter role. The lefty Mike Blumenshine will be our 3rd starter this year. And then with those injuries that we've talked about to Weiss and Rangel, Dave Baumler, who's been our number 5 starter frequently over the past few years, going to get an opportunity to be our 4th starter as this year gets underway. And Ernesto Comunez, who's been in and out of the rotation the last few years and also had some injury issues, going to be our number 5 starter this year, at least at the start of the year. Joe Heilman back in a closer role after an outstanding season last year as both closer and stopper at times. Wilson Rangel, Jonathan Scherer, and Eric Keach all back in setup roles this year. David Ibarra, Bobby Surgener, and Luis Aguayo all also back in the bullpen and middle relief roles. And Jesus Ramos has come up through our farm system after being an 8th-round pick. Doesn't have too much to prove left in AAA at this point after winning 10 games in 13 games, playing primarily in AAA the last couple seasons. Going to get an opportunity to see what he can do in long relief. He'd probably be the first one sent down when someone's healthy. And then Mike Homer, the two-way player. Homer was a second-round draft pick back in 2036. Only one option year left for the two-way player. He hit well in a small sample size in the majors for us last year, but you can see he did not pitch well in the majors for us last year. But Homer going to get an opportunity to be a long reliever, mop-up guy kind of for us initially out of the bullpen, while also serving as a left-handed pinch hitter and a piece of depth for both the infield and outfield as far as the everyday players. So with Homer in the mix, that actually gives us 14 players who can pitch. So should be, once again, a very deep and we hope high-quality pitching staff for Oakland this year. And hoping that before the end of the month, we will have Macho Rangel back, and hopefully sometime in mid to late May, we'll also have Doug Weiss back. No real surprises, I think, as far as the 26-man roster and the position players who are coming north. Jonah Richards back as our startup catcher. Ron Markley going to be his backup. Luis Covarrubias, who we talked about, his results in the development lab. He's going to be our everyday catcher in AAA to ensure he continues to get playing time. But very conceivable, particularly with his outstanding defense, that he'll be taking over for Ron Markley as our backup catcher next year. Juan Ramirez back as our everyday designated hitter. Luis Godina going to be playing first base for us every day now with the good defense we have. We moved him into second base last year, but going to give other guys an opportunity this year. Phil Swenson is going to be our starting shortstop against left-handed pitching. Mike Homer, as we talked about, left-handed hitter who can pitch, hit, and he can also play pretty competent to very good defense at a lot of different positions. So he's going to be a key utility guy for us this year. Juan Pimentel back as our third baseman. He's going to be hitting second in the lineup. Chisa Niwata going to be our leadoff hitter, playing short against righties and second against lefties. David Palomares, the utility infielder who we signed to that 10-year, $26 million deal. Like his defense, like his versatility, like his durability. Question the bat a bit, but the 23-year-old is going to get the first crack to be our everyday second baseman against right-handed pitching this year. Turning to our outfielders, as we talked about, not a lot of decisions to make here. Darnell Selvey, our everyday left fielder. Bobby Armstrong, our everyday center fielder. Arturo Uresti, our everyday right fielder. Jesus Aguilar gives us some speed and defensive versatility with a left-handed bat as a utility outfielder for us. And Homer can also play the outfield, and Ramirez can, if we really are forced to, play the outfield for us in a pinch as well. So after a 120-win season a year ago and the loss of a longtime ace, Jesus Saldana, who had become our closer, important pitcher in Mike Gallick, and also moving on from Amari Alcindor, as well as the rental that we had in Galterio Mancina this past offseason. Not expecting that we're going to see that this is going to be a 120-win team here when we go to the preseason predictions, but would still expect that we're going to win a lot of games this year. And we did have a 111-51 record in the simulation, almost 900 runs scored, the best in the American League, and just 601 runs allowed, also the best in the American League in this simulation. So the Oakland A's remain one of the top organizations in baseball, at least we expect them to. You can see offensively, last year's most valuable player, Jonah Richards, the catcher, expected to have another big offensive season. And Juan Pimentel, a bit of a potential bounce-back year from the former Rookie of the Year and most valuable player as well. Had just a 119 WRC plus a year ago, so certainly not the kind of numbers that he put up when he was the American League MVP or even the Rookie of the Year before that. But nice to see Pimentel potentially having a bounce back season. Interestingly, they don't expect any of our pitchers to have monster years. Steve Genus, who was earlier on the trading block for the Texas Rangers, expected to have another monster year for them. Andres Rojas, the knuckleballer who's still with the Yankees, also expected to have a big season. Over in the National League, the Milwaukee Brewers with 95 wins and the Washington Nationals with 94 wins expected to be the top two teams in the league. Pitching-wise, Andy Grimes expected to have another big year, 17-7 with a 3.12 ERA. And Mike Ramsey, the brilliant two-way player for Atlanta, expected to go 16-11 with a 3.65 ERA. Our old buddy Chase Dora also expected to have 16 wins for the Dodgers. So will be interesting to see what ultimately happens this year. But right now our A's are projected to once again have the best record in baseball and be the only 100-win team in baseball. And with the amount of attrition that we've had in recent years off of our roster every offseason, if we can continue to deliver 100-win seasons and position ourselves for home field advantage throughout the playoffs, that's certainly not a result that I will complain about. So hopefully some accuracy there, at least in terms of what's going to happen this year. The lineup doesn't look all that different when all is said and done. If we think about our core lineup against right-handed pitching and what this lineup looked like at the end of last season, really the only difference is that with the departure of the first baseman Galterio Mancina, who we picked up as a rental, Luis Godina pivots back to first base, and we put the youngster David Palomares into the lineup as our second baseman. Definitely should help tighten up our infield defense. And the hope is that against right-handed pitching, he's a productive major league pitcher, major league hitter. The former international free agent signing has pretty extreme splits. Given that he's a left-handed hitter, our hope is that he'll ultimately be a pretty productive bat, even if we're only starting him 120, 130 games a year against right-handed pitching. So we will see how that works out. Hopefully, when we think about these lineups, Palomares and Swenson as the platoon members of our infield will hit well enough that we don't need to go searching for other solutions there. But if we do, we've got a lot of depth in our organization in the higher levels in terms of some infielders who could be helping us in the not-too-distant future. And there is always the trade market as well. So cautiously optimistic about what we're going to get from these Oakland Athletics here in 2043. And we'll find out how the season gets underway in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.